If it's okay with you, please let us know what happened.
I will. This all started on October 11th, 1973. Uh, I was working in the oil field, so I decided to quit. And because I was getting married November 9th, and I was working a lot of hours. So I called a friend of mine, Charlie Hickson, to see if I could go to work in with him, which was in Pascagoula at the shipyard. He said, "Yeah, I need a ship fitter, so if you'll come tomorrow, which was October 11th, I'll rent you a room for a week or two, and you can stay with me, and we'll go from there." So I went and I took my physical, and I brashed in. I worked all day long, and about 5 that evening, it's time for us to get off. So he said, "Let's go fishing." I said, "Well, Charlie, I got one problem. I didn't bring my fishing equipment." He said, "Well, that's okay. I'll loan you some of mine." For a man to loan me his fishing equipment from the South, that like giving you his wife and firstborn, it's just unheard of. So I said, "Okay." We went by his apartment and got the fishing equipment. Went to an old shipyard to start with, and the bugs were so bad there. He said, "Well, I know a place called the Shaw Peters Shipyard." So we went to the Shaw Peters Shipyard, and it's closed and abandoned, and there's a lot of debris laying around. And I seen some no trespassing signs. I asked Charlie, I said, "Why did we go to jail for fishing?" "Oh, don't worry about it, son. I fished here many times before. Let's go on, go to jail." So I avoided the trespassing signs, walked down. There was a lot of debris and a lot of this tall marsh grass that you could see. And I walked down and I sat on the pier, and this marsh grass pulled up a log and sat down. And I was looking across the river at a ship, a big ship, and I was wondering to myself, now how does something made out of steel float? It's just amazing to me. And I was sitting there just daydreaming, fishing, trying to wind down for the day's work. And I noticed some blue hazy lights come out across the water. So we have these blue lights coming across, and I figured we was going to jail for trespassing. So Chart stood up about this time, and Charlie stood up and turned around and looked. And we'd been better off if it had been the police. It was three bulky looking creatures coming toward us. We couldn't quite make out their face or their body or nothing then because their lights were so bright. It's just like a big spotlight shined on us, and it was so bright when we turned around that couldn't tell what they really was. We I still thought it was a policeman until they got almost on us, and two of them got a hold of Charlie, and one of them got a hold of myself. Well, that's the last time I seen Charlie. They gave us a shot, or what they found out later through the hospital was a shot, and it was just kind of to knock the edge off to make you where you wasn't so scared. And they took us to the door of this craft, and when couldn't tell it was a spacecraft or nothing by then, but they took us to the door, and I looked in the door and I noticed one strange thing: the lights was coming from the walls. Uh, it was just illuminating out of the walls, and it was really bright. But when I got to the door, the lights dimmed, and we made a left turn, and I noticed it was a robotic, this creature, big ugly one, what I call him, moved like he was a robot instead of like a human. It just mechanically moved. Uh, and he took me to a room and put me on this examination table at about a 45-degree angle. And out of the ceiling came something that looked similar to a deck of cards. and they was blue on bottom. And out of this card stopped about or this what I call a vector card stopped about a foot and a half from the forehead, and I was laying down. I wasn't restrained because he had gave me this shot to calm me, and I couldn't move nothing but my eyes, my head. And I noticed this thing came down. It landed about a foot and a half from my head, and it started revolving around, kind of like later on. I found out it was kind of reminded me of an MRI, and it clicked, click, 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 four clicks. It stopped about a foot in my head and went back up to the ceiling, and that was out of the way. Well, this big creature, the big ugly one, had gone off and sat in a corner by then to the side and just shut down like it was nothing to him. And this female looking creature came out, and I call her a female. I don't know if she was or not. I rolled my head and I looked, and it looked like a female, like an average old earth woman. Uh, Matter of fact, I made the statement if I'd been in a bar and drinking, I would have probably tried to pick her up, ask her out on a date. That's just how normal she looked. She had ears, she had eyes, she had nose. I didn't notice any breasts. The only thing I could figure was her hair was like a female and her facial features was like a female. Now, the difference I seen in her was on both hands. Her two middle fingers on both hands was a little longer than what an average woman's hands would be or a man's hands, either one. Well, she came out and she looked at me and she grabbed me with her left hand by the chin and she took her right hand and she rammed them two fingers, two middle fingers down my throat. They went behind that little thing that hangs down behind the throat, eula or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And I started choking and blood came out and scratching my throat. And it was painful. I ain't gonna lie to nobody. And she pulled her fingers out and mentally, and maybe I imagined this and maybe I didn't, but she said, "We don't mean to hurt you." But the damage was already done. It was already hurting. I was bleeding. I was had blood all over my shirt and different things. And she pulled her fingers out and she just stood there and looked at me for a minute. And I was thinking, well, it's too late now. This is just what was going through my mind. You've already put your fingers down my throat and hurt me. But I think she was trying to put a transmitter up my nasal cavity
Oh,
and or some way to communicate with me or already had one in there or something. But she made a grumbling noise after she pulled her fingers out like an alligator mating call. Now, I don't know if y'all know what a mating call sounds like to an alligator,
yeah. I heard this
but
before.
it
Yeah.
vibrates the whole ground, the whole marsh, and it's gunk, gunk, and it just went all over the where I was laying, and it went all over me. And this thing in the corner, the old big ugly one, jumped up and come over and grabbed me by the left arm again, which was easy to do. And he gave me another go to hell shot, and he picked me up. And by that time, I was kind of numb. I could still conscious of what was going on, and he carried me out to set me on almost on a pier in the same spot that I was on. And except I was standing with my arms reached out toward the river. And that's the first time I heard Charlie. Charlie said, son, how are you? And I said, well, I'm okay, I guess. And he said, let's sit down and talk about this. The danger's over. Well, we sat down on the pier and we agreed not to tell nobody. So this was the agreement that me and him made because back in '73, people would think you was crazy, and they still would. Well, we agreed not to tell nobody, and we sat there and we finally sat there about 15 minutes and went back to the car. Well, when we got to the car, I noticed there was windows on his side was shattered in place. I was parked on the driver's side. The passenger side was sitting toward the craft, and they were shattered in place. Now, this craft, when it took off, it made kind of like a zipping noise. It picked up off the ground, and it said zip, and it just disappeared into thin air. Well, when we got to the car and the windows were shattered, I noticed when he opened the door, the windows fell out, and I had trouble cranking the car. We was in my car. I wound on it. Finally, I got it cranked, and on the way out, we started going back toward his apartment. Well, there was a store there. He said, "Let's pull over. I want to make a phone call." Well, it's getting late. I figured he was going to call his wife because it was pretty late, and we was been gone, and he was just going to tell her we was coming home. But he called Keesler Air Force Base. They told him, which I didn't know what was going on because we had agreed not to tell nobody. They told him to call the local authorities. Well, he called the local authorities, which was Jackson County Sheriff Department, and they sat right there and it took them about 10 minutes to get there. Well, he come back in the car. He said, "Well, said stay here until they got here." I said, "Who in the hell's coming?" He said, "The police department." So we sat around and waited. I was afraid to leave because I knew they'd stop us coming. Of course, I was driving. They asked me to see my driver's license. They looked in the car, told me to step out of the car. As I stepped out, they told me to stand on one leg, bend your head back, touch your nose with your right hand and close your eyes and count from 200 backwards. I said, "Hell, man, I can't do that sober much less a bad drink." He said, "Well, go ahead and do it." So I did it the best I could. I walked the line. I took the little field sobriety test. He said, "Well, follow us back to the sheriff department." And
Well, that's a hell of a story. That's a hell of a story. And I, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you some questions.
go right ahead.
Let me start with before all that happened. What was your opinion on UFOs and aliens, anyways? Did you
I didn't know about them.
nothing?
I had no idea. I never heard of one.
You talked about a blue beam that came from the spacecraft and it blinded you a little bit. And did you feel something when this blue beam hit you, or was it just a light?
It was just a light.
It was just a
I
light.
didn't feel nothing when it hit me.
Yeah. When you saw those creatures coming your way, wasn't your first reaction to run away when you recognized?
Scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
But there was water on my left, water on my right.
Nowhere to run.
There was water in front.
Mm.
Nowhere to run. They was coming from behind.
What what went through your mind when you saw those creatures? Did you recognize them as some kind of aliens or monsters, or
Well,
you think it was people in disguise or something?
to start with, I didn't know. I thought it could be the law because we seen the blue hazy lights. That was the color of the lights that the law had.
Yeah.
But the closer they got, it was too late to run. And time they gave me that, grabbed me by the arm and gave me the shot.
Yeah.
It was what I call a go to hell shot. You could care less then for just a few minutes.
Something like a tranquilizer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a like
I
a
mean, I was conscious of what was going on,
yeah.
but it took all the fear out, and I just went along with the program then.
Yeah.
What they had.
Do you think these creatures were some kind of robots too? You talked about a robotic-like creature.
I'm pretty sure that probably the creatures that came forward was
Yeah.
that was there. But the lady that come out and examined me, I don't think she was. No,
Maybe there were some kind of foot
I,
soldiers, something to do the dirty work. Some,
yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I believe
yeah.
she was probably by herself and probably had them, and they did all the work in case of contamination and all.
Mm.
I really classify her as a doctor.
Yeah. You talked about that feminine looking creature that moved like a robot and she ran your fingers down your throat, but you have absolutely no idea why, right? So she didn't
Well,
place anything or put something out, you don't know.
as far as I know, she could have put a transformer
Mm.
or some way to keep up with me through there, but Lord only knows. Ever since then, I've had open heart surgery and cancer, and they
Yeah.
done the MRIs with the cancer and CT scans and all. They hadn't found nothing.
Yeah. Did it leave any scars to this day or something? Do we have
I
problems?
I, I have a scar on my arm where they injected me. Now, so they probably had some kind of air gun or something in their
Oh,
sleeve or
oh,
hand or something, and they just put it down there and injected me because it ripped me, ripped my arm.
yeah. So it was pretty rough process.
It was.
Yeah. Um, did something strange happen to you or your body after this incident? So I mean, like some days later or maybe months?
Well, over the years, I think it has a lot to do with health. I've had two open heart surgeries.
Yeah.
I've had cancer. I had a kidney removed. I had cancer of the kidney. It spread to my lungs. Now I'm taking chemotherapy for the cancer. So it's getting better though.
And you said she, although you don't know if it was she, but you're guessing or you had the feeling as if it was a she. She
I
come,
had the
yeah.
feeling it was, yeah.
She
I've,
communicated with you, yeah, like
uh,
telepathic.
yes, she did.
Yeah,
She said, "We don't mean to hurt you."
yeah. But that was the only communication.
That was the only communication. Besides that noise she made,
Yeah, that alligator like sound.
yeah, the mating call for the gate or what I call it.
Did you ever ask yourself why me, or do you believe, or maybe do you believe they came for you two guys?
It's hard to say. That I've always wondered why, and I asked myself why, and I hope I live long enough to get an answer. I don't think I will.
What was your what was the feeling if you look deep inside yourself? Did you feel they just they tried to do something good, or did they care about you, or were they bad?
I think that was bad.